So it's been interesting. It's been interesting these past couple of weeks. Um, Life kind of kicks in and don't really find the time. But what I do not ever neglect are the individuals reaching out to me by um, any sort of message that they can, and the discussions are beyond lively. And just sitting back from the last time I did a justification live, seeing how the responses go, and then continuing to produce justification, putting that out there, seeing the responses, seeing the responses. And the responses have been moving because I have, on one hand, justification life. I've been talking about the experience that blood. What does that blood of Jesus represent? Not literal, not anything as we would think. It is simply an individual saying, if I could put this into real terms, share my experience. And my experience has been a learning experience of separating from what is traditionally thought, owned, and cultivated to uncovering an experience where discovery of the devotional conversation's character exists. And then on justification, that alongside the message from justification of the garden, everything taking place therein in the garden and getting to the point, the highlight, and the episodes that will come after will continue to harp on this point of what was placed due to their consequence at the east of the garden, imaginary figures joined by a veil. When you get this word cherubim, as I showed, strip it down to its Hebrew context. It is an imaginary figure, it is not real. Keeping that plain and simple. And also that flaming sword, not a literal flaming sword. We just have to remember that the author writing the book of Genesis is not writing this in real time, nor is this actual history. This is all seen from the point of view or from the vantage point of a vision. And what they are envisioning from this vision is what is documented, and it is philosophical, absolutely philosophical. And so the 2 points from the justification lives that I've been putting out, and then from the justifications that I've been presenting, the appeal has been one drawing a bit of conflict for asking the question and for bringing up the thought, where is God in all of this? If I'm doing all of this because I'm just wanting to be closer to whatever I want to be closer to, shouldn't there be some sort of manifestation of some sort of deity to me like it is in the scriptures? Shouldn't that come true to fruition from my experience? The answer is no. The answer is absolutely not. And the author of the book of Genesis highlights this pretty brilliantly. The essence of the devotional conversation is captured in Genesis 1, 2, and 3. What is placed at the east of that garden, what is placed at the east of that garden being imaginary figures joined to a veil, it's guarding a specific philosophy. It says that it is guarding the way to the tree of life. As broken down in justification, we've seen that the tree of life isn't actually a literal tree, nor is life actually literal life. Imaginary figures joined to a veil. And now, I love when I do justification live, the comments that I get are, it's better in a sense because there's not so much philosophical talk and inquiry. I am more of an open book and open space, and so that's what I'm going to do still. The imaginary figures joined to a Baal. Every single generation has its Baal. Every single generation has its imaginary figures. We can't escape this. That's the way things go. You could drop us in any single generation. We are going to come across a Baal joined by imaginary figures. Horus, remember Horus, with his 12 disciples, and his father Osiris, dying and rising deity, and his mother Isis, who conceived him, her son Horus, through virginity. cutting off the finding the members of her husband that had been dismembered and using those members to put together a serum to circle herself around to get herself pregnant without Osiris, yet with him. Every single generation has their Baal and imaginary figures. No matter what, no matter what. Every single generation has the same conversation of this is God, this is that, this is this is that. It's gonna happen. It is what it is. And it's not just me saying that. And I'm sure it's not just you knowing that. I'm showing all of this from the Bible, breaking down the Hebrew context of it and the language therein that is synonymous with the outcome intended by the author that is writing these things. So the imaginary figures joined to a Baal, they are protecting not revelation of God. And that's something key that the author of the book of Genesis is highlighting. The comments from my videos that not even that are there published, but through email, the most sincere individuals finding my content to be moving and engaging are wanting an experience with quote unquote God. And whether they are in churches or whether they are not in churches, it seems like everything that's being done is for an experience with quote unquote God. They want the Isaiah experience. They want the Peter and vision experience on the roof. They want Moses on the mountain experience. They want the Adam experience of God's voice in the garden. None of that is literal. None of that will happen because there is no deity on the other side of this experience. How can we know that? We can know that again by the illustration given from Genesis. The other side of the experience that we are wanting, if we are sincere in what we desire, and not simply just the craft of a belief, but also in the character of a human and devotional being, is understanding. It just so happens that guarding the way to understanding are imaginary figures joined to a Baal, or are a Jesus joined by disciples, or are church fathers joined by Jesus, or are a Baal, an Adonis, a Tammuz, a Mithra, a Ahura Mazda, a whatever you want to put in there, joined by imaginary figures. All of that's guarding the way, not to a deity, not to a revelation of some vision, but to the actual discovery of the philosophy of quote unquote life, which philosophy leads to no manifestation of a deity, but rather revelation of personal and devotional self. There was no block, if I'm speaking as the one speaking, that put that block on the way of life. There is no block on me. There is no block on the all capital Lord. There was a block on the way to life. The mind constructing the scriptures does not care. And I think we really have to get this in our minds. The mind that has constructed the scriptures, and let's let go of the concept of a deity for a second, or of gods for a second, the mind, the intelligence behind the philosophy that is at the core of the Bible, does not care to manifest in any sort of physical way or likeness, whether that physicality be mental or whether that physicality be through some sort of flesh-based stimulus, to anyone, because that's not the point of it all. The point of it all is what's guarded, or what was guarded, the route therein, the experience thereof, and the product confined to that guard. If we want to understand what the core philosophy of the scriptures is, we're not going to understand what a deity is, because Bible doesn't do that. Bible doesn't harp on deity. Deity does not exist to the core concept of the Bible. And I think that that's very weird to hear. And through the weeks, as I've said it, in private and conversation to others, it has been weird for them to hear. Because for some reason, it's really difficult to separate Bible from religion. Um, in the same sense, it may be difficult to separate alcoholic from person, drug addict from person, um, who we see on a TV from person. In the same sense, it's difficult to separate Bible from religion. If we had to get to know that drug addict, we would actually know that they're not actually a drug addict. They're just an outlet abuser. If we had to get to know that alcoholic, we would know that they're really not an alcoholic. They're just an outlet abuser. There are things stemming in their life causing them to succumb to alcoholism and to drugs. Tend to those things, and their human comes out, and then they shine. Get the person from the screen in real life, and then you realize that that's really not who you thought they were. It's really not who they thought they were. There are times when I have been heard on the radio and I've been seen my face. There have been times when I've been seen on somewhere or heard somewhere and somebody speaks to me and then they go, "Wow, you're not as serious as I thought you were ever. I thought you were just a serious person." Take religion out of Bible because religion in and of itself, if you know the philosophy of the scriptures, has nothing to do with Bible. Bible does not advocate for religion. And that's a flip because the surface of the scriptures, as I'm always saying, the surface of the scriptures advocates for blueprint religion, righteousness by religious law, deed and act by exercising supposed or presumed faith in ritual, in baptism, in theory, in dogma, in whatever you want to add on to that. Pretty sure you get what I'm saying. On the surface, Bible advocates that. But if you really look closer, just as you can see if you analyze the character of the author called Paul in their writings to the Corinthians, to the Galatians, to the Colossians, there's a bit of humor that the authors of the Bible are doing by coating the surface of the scriptures the way that they do. As the author Paul mocks Christian ministers for relying so heavily on other ministers and not getting into a personal experience for themselves, so too the Bible mocks, first off, the blueprint of what religion is. How do we know that? How can I say that? I can say that the Bible on the surface mocks the blueprint of religion due to the example given in the book of Genesis concerning the consequence of the error that the pair suffered. The consequence, I'm not talking about what their conscience uncovered, I'm talking about what their act covered. Their act covered the route to the philosophy of life with imaginary images joined to a veil. This is how the Bible mocks and laughs at its reader, as it should. Because you can't just read the surface of the Bible and believe that that's that. In the same sense, you just can't read the surface of me, of you, of a person, and believe that that's that. We are walking around thinking that the Bible is a history book. We're walking around thinking that the Bible is a comic book. We're walking around thinking that the Bible is a traditional book. And although it has the appearance of so, although it may appear to be such, uh, there's something different about the content and the structure of that content within that book. And to be able to separate that book from itself, and you can only really do that, and you can only really do that when you are going through an experience, allowing that conversation of yours to really develop alongside the content that is within the scriptures. So you're going to see on the surface, if that's not the experience, the Bible is a book of rapes and incest, and a God that will kill you for this, and a God that will kill you for that, a this and a that, and that's really all cool because in 2024 that's how it sounds. But go back 2,000 years ago, and that was life. So you're reading a book about the life of individuals 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago, and you're expecting it to make sense for us in a society of which these things are just not in play anymore. There are no tribes walking around um, here um, doing anything. There's like the world that is within the scriptures is a world unto itself. If we're not able to realize that separation, we're not going to be able to get the content, because although it is a world unto itself, and although it is a world fixed to a prior generation and prior generations, its content is written in present tense. That is not a literary mistake. It's written in present tense because although it's written the way it is written, it is not a physical narrative. It's not a physical narrative, it is a continuing narrative. And a continuing narrative in 2024, when you look around and you don't see what's in the book continued, you have to just think, how can that continue in relevance in 2024? How can that continue in relevance in 1888 and 1755 and all these years prior? What is the relevance? Because there is no Jephthah. There's no Jephthah who was a Gilead from Gilead, and he was a son of a harlot, and his father then had other sons that kicked him out of the house, and he left the house and went to the land of Tob and was around strange individuals, and then the Israelites came back to him. You got to make sense of all that. And that story does sound pretty familiar to the one in Matthew, but still, there's figurative illustrations there that we have to put together to realize that the surface that the Bible is, I'm saying all of this because the surface that the Bible is, that's the trap. And again, we know that's the trap because guarding the core underlying philosophy of what these things mean are imaginary images joined to a Baal, are an assembly from a supposedly enslaved Egyptian housed land, joined by a Moses led out into a wilderness of images constructed from prior Egyptian landscapes, called their own tabernacle, for a deity whose name is Israel, whose people is called Israel, whose name breaks down to Isis, Ra, Ra, Ell, and the whole story in and of itself. What we're seeing on the surface is a mocking of the individual that will contain only surface within their devotional conversation. And if that will be that individual conversation, so be it. Nothing against, well, critical thinking is everything, but we will have what we will have. Bible doesn't judge. Bible gives us two routes. And how do I know that the Bible gives us two routes? Again, Genesis. Bible gives us two routes. There is that route to life, quote unquote life, the philosophy of understand how to personally and devotionally carry the human being. Or then there is the concept of good and evil, the concept of the knowledge of good and evil, which is not a concept of morality, because that context has nothing to do with morality. It has everything to do with understanding a preconceived action, deed, or route from a preordained outcome. In essence, religious law. So you can either live by maintaining an experience that is gaining wisdom for its own, or you can maintain an experience that is succumbing to the conscience of other minds for an experience of other minds. by religious law. Now, on both sides, the outcome of both sides, there is no deity. On the side of the concept of knowledge of good and evil, there is a supposed deity because you're supposed to lend yourself and give yourself to deeds and to acts and to penances. Eat the waver, put the thing on the forehead, dip in the water, remember these theories and pass through this scholarship and get accreditation and do all of this for the sake of hopefully or pretending to be or believing to have a vision of some sort of deity at the end of it when we're only lying to ourselves because that's not how things go in reality, nor are they supposed to. On the other hand, you've got the concept of the tree of life or the philosophy of understanding the devotional conversation's character. What's guarding that, due to the, let's just keep it simple, the error there are imaginary figures joined to a veil. So if you really want to understand the concept of what the philosophy of personal and devotional life is, primarily or firstly devotional, secondarily personal, you're going to have to be able to go through the Moses in the wilderness with the images and the tabernacles and the serpents and all of this just to get that answer. You're going to have to go through the Adonises and the Zeuses and the Jesuses and the resurrections and the disciples and the church fathers. You're going to have to go through all of that. And when I say go through all of that, I don't mean study it. I don't mean examine it. I mean, as Moses divided the waters, as it says, and he went through, we're going to have to separate. We're going to have to separate and pass through on that dry ground. And that passing through and that separation is an act that is not an easy thing to do, but that's what's supposed to happen. That's what we are supposed to produce for our experience. That passing through, we have to go through, and that means going through trash. We have to go through waters. In the Bible, water is a figurative illustration or figuratively represents peoples, nations, tongues, languages, and families. All of these things are not ethnic, what I just mentioned. This is devotional. This is denominational. Bible context should be held to Bible context. As it says, there are two nations in your womb. Bible never says two children, right? These are two nations in your womb that will go at one another. Separating the waters, we have to separate the peoples, nations, languages, and tongues and families in order to get to what is just for our individual conversation. And on the other side of that justness is not a deity. Bible never lets anyone know that a deity is on the other side because deity does not exist to the Bible's mind. What exists to the Bible's mind, and it's always crazy when I say that and when I see the faces of individuals that hear this, because again, it's difficult to separate Bible from religion. Religion, the creation of the concept within the Bible, the initiator of a philosophy within its own self that we don't know. But on the other side of that, the Bible doesn't advocate deity. The Bible actually advocates the individual conversation coming into an understanding of what it is. Why? Because there is no deity that is going to live this life for you. There is no deity that is living this life for you. There is no deity that will do anything in this life for you. When you wake up, it is not a deity. When you go to sleep, and I understand that there is a bit of thankfulness because I need to be able, I need to just take a moment to separate deity from existing creating mind that put all of this together. So deity and existing mind, the living mind of the living creating Father of all of our devotional conversations, thoughts, feelings, actions, is not the deity uh, that has been plagiarizing what is actually in existence. So when we're going through our life, deity is not the other end of that. To the Bible's mind, what's on the other end is life. The only thing that matters to the Bible's mind, get wisdom, get understanding. With all thy getting, get understanding. Keep my words, place them into your heart, and live. This is the philosophy, not just within the book of Proverbs, but in every single um, book of the Bible. And when I say book of the Bible, I'm saying Genesis to Malachi, not the second hand that was slapped on to the back of it. Um, that is called from Matthew to Revelation. Every single philosophy from Genesis to Malachi, and especially within Genesis chapters 1, 2, and 3, they articulate this point that the race is not to a deity, nor the stride to a quote unquote God, but the walk, the stride, the race, it is to an understanding, quote unquote, life that is both personal and that is devotional. So we're on the other side of that. The experience draws the individual not closer to a deity, but to the mind that they know has allowed them to go through what they went through for an experience to draw closer to the understanding that that mind has and to the understanding that the devotional conversation has within it to guide then the human being. So the saying of get wisdom, get understanding, with all they getting, get understanding, remember my words, keep them in thy heart, and live. That is because there is to be nothing around the neck telling us that a God is to be worshipped. There's nothing on a wall of somebody's face saying this is the deity. There's to be no theory that is believed until death. The idea is that I will create a new covenant with them, and in their hearts and in their minds will I write my understanding. So the experience is personal. The experience has nothing to do with the deity. The experience in the end or the route of it, it really has nothing to do with the condition of falling servant to a deity, because the Bible in and of itself does not proclaim a philosophy of existence of deity. That's not how that goes. And so as I'm putting out my content, and as I'm reviewing my emails, and as I'm going back and forth with people in emails, it's coming across to me that the idea is still, and it's really weird. It's really weird. The idea is still that I'm going to church. The idea is still that I'm still doing this. I'm still doing that because I'm looking for God to convert me. I'm looking for the existence of God. Now, keep in mind, this is not just church people. This is also people who call themselves atheists. Um, and looking still, both people, or should I say both categories are in the same religion looking for the same thing. It's really interesting. And both will find none. Both will find none. That's why both need to continue to rely on a ritual of whatever is perpetuated within the mind to the one that is atheist. Um, that word is just really structurally incongruent with the actual experience when you really press the individual that calls himself an atheist, and that's what I often have fun doing. And then the individual calling themselves a Christian, the individual calling themselves that, the two not really realizing that they're looking for the same thing. But what they're actually looking for is understanding. And the understanding that they will gain, both of them, it will only take place as they let go of the imaginary images joined to the veil that is keeping them from understanding that concept of philosophy, of quote unquote life within the scriptures. And so when it comes to this question, as I've been asked, am I doing this for, um, um, Am I doing this to get the existence of God in me or out of me? Or where is the existence of God in all of this? Where is the existence of God in all of this? And it's really weird and interesting explaining these things to individuals that may not have spent a lot of time um, dissecting the Bible's philosophy, seeing only the surface nature of that philosophy, and that surface nature being something that is a repellent, and it's supposed to be a repellent. We have to remember that author of the book of Genesis is giving us the secret. The service of the Bible is always going to be joined to and containing imaginary images joined to a Baal. So if you're getting frustrated at a deity that is allowing rape and that is raping also and that is doing all of this, and you get past Genesis to Malachi, you enter into Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and now all of a sudden the deity is raping, not physically but by his spirit. It is a spiritual rape that he's doing to a woman, and all of this, and you confused about it all. We are getting the lie. We are fussing over the lie. We're fussing over the images joined to a Baal, the imaginary images joined to a Baal. That's the consequence for the error of choosing the concept of good and evil. So long as our mind remains on the concept of good and evil, again, this isn't anything to do with morality. Concept of good and evil is a concept of uh, preordained action for expected outcome. Concept of good and evil is ruled by religious law. So if the mind is getting trapped up on religious law, religious theory, religious dogma, religious routine, religious habit, if the mind is getting caught up on that, we're getting caught up on the surface. And the Bible is written, as is the example in Genesis letting us know, to entrap surface listeners. And it is what I was saying in my previous episode of Justification is that when the mind is not allowing itself personally to understand what it knows it needs to, delusion will be given to it. So, delusion to the individual that is growing frustrated, and delusion to the individual that will not think more on the matter and fall more in love with the cusp of what that surface is. Both parties get delusion. That's the consequence. They're getting delusion as a consequence to actually keep them from understanding the main idea. And that's really what you would want to do if you were protecting something. I mean, imagine you have a car and your car is the most beautiful thing to you. And what do you see people do with their cars when there's going to be too much heat, when there's going to be bad weather, when there's going to be this, when there's going to be that? What do people do with their cars? They cover them. It's a bloody car, but they're covering the car because it's beautiful. They've worked hard for it. It rides good. They've spent money on it. They don't want the heat or anything else destroying it. They cover it up. Imagine that same thing, but that's what the Bible does with its words. And the author, again, of the book of Genesis is letting us know that that's what the Bible does with its words. Bible is using surface understanding to be or to act or to thrive as a repellent to untoward minds, to untoward this, to untoward that. Think of a personality within a um, human personality that is um, feeling discouraged, feeling unloved, feeling going through challenges, feeling not accepted, feeling as if they are not worthy. What's the one thing such a personality is going to do? If you know anything about psychology, such a person is going to act out in a way that is contrary to how they feel. Why? It makes no sense, but when you're in that state of mind, it makes perfect sense. Because you're already not feeling the way you feel for some sort of reason, and you want to repel anything because you already assume that they're lying to you and you don't want to continue lying to yourself, even though you already are lying to yourself. Okay, so we can take that same to the Bible here. Although on the surface, Bible is managing blueprint of religion, right? What we see as blueprint of religion, it's really difficult to get beyond Bible and religion. In reality, Bible has nothing to do with religion. Bible has nothing to do with traditional deity. It's all a cover. It's a cover to repel individual dissonant minds that will not penetrate their own conscience and consciousness to get beyond the surface, not just of the scriptures, but of their own self. Key part of this, a key part of what the Bible is about. You really can't have a value for life until you realize that you're worth nothing and that you have nothing. You can't value something until you've died to it. You can't value life until you've had an experience where you find something precious within it. You can't value philosophy and kill Bible for a second. You can't value any philosophy in life if you're not willing to actually understand the value of that philosophy to your life personally. And the only way that that can happen is if our life somehow takes a specific turn that leads us to recognizing something valuable. The Bible is the same way. A broken and a contrite spirit will I not turn away. Why? Because the only way to value what is within any sort of words, whether they are in the Bible or in anything, the only way to value what is within words, you have to feel. So the individual without feeling, the individual looking for something that is contrary to an enlightened feeling, all they will see is surface. All they will get is surface. All they will get is imaginary images joined to a veil because they're not in the right place. They're not in the right place. Their weather, as the car that is covered, doesn't want to, as the owner covering their car doesn't want the weather to disturb the car's looks or anything. The weather, the condition of the individual is not suitable to see and to observe or to handle the vehicle that the Bible's driving. That's the surface. Author of the book of Genesis, and I'm taking time because the comments and the conversations have just moved me to say some things just to get this right about what's going on justification. And the reason for me putting out those justification lives is the Bible is philosophy is alive. Philosophy is a living thing. Philosophy is a living thing, and the environment that we live in as human beings is a living environment. And the living environment that we are living in, it exists via energy and frequency. The energy and frequency of our intentions is of more value, is the wealth, is the currency to the environment that we are living in than anything else. If the vibe, the frequency, the energy of our devotional conversation, if it is not meted out, pruned and purged correctly, surface will be all that it will be given. The consequence of such a conversation that will continue to exist, whether they are saying they don't exist or whether they willingly plunge into it, the concept of knowledge of good and evil, that conversation will be given the delusion of imaginary figures joined to a veil. They will grow frustrated with those imaginary figures. They will grow in love with those imaginary figures. Surface will be all they know. Surface is imaginary images and a veil. That's all they will know. That's everything that will be to them. They will hate it. That will be their hate. It will be illogical. They will love it. That will be their love. It will be illogical. It will be their fascination. They will be fascinated by it. It will be illogical. That will be their devastation. It will devastate them. It's illogical. All because they were not willing to part the waters of what those imaginary figures and bales are, to walk on the dry ground. And this is a quote that the Bible continuously references when you, for example, Jonah, I am in Hebrew of the Hebrews, and I honor the Lord that created all things, including the dry ground. That means that means something. We have to realize the imagery and the connotation of what that's saying, because it's in reference not to a deity, to an experience. And if we're not willing to go through that experience, on the other side of that, we will not receive the quote unquote understanding of life that we are supposed to be receiving. There's no deity waiting for us with their arms open on the other side. If we could see that, like here in real time, that is what should be expected. Otherwise, we are just imagining an outcome. And we are using the Bible to allow that outcome to become real to us because that's there written. Not really realizing that the authors of the Bible are using a code, surface understanding, to deter as a repellent the individual mind that will not look beyond what they're actually reading. And so their experiences are going to start meshing with the experiences they see in the Bible. That's the trap. Instead, because the Bible doesn't document this so clearly, because the controversy wasn't won by the philosophy of life, the controversy was won by the concept of good and evil. What should actually be had is the individual having an experience with words, using that experience with words in the daily life, taking the daily life and making it more um, than what it is, and taking what is that more and recycling it, rehashing it, to jump back into the system that the scriptures are, to pull back out something more to examine and to rehash and to just complete that cycle. Because mind, uh, putting together the philosophy at the core of the scriptures, that mind putting together that core philosophy wants the individual to realize their conversation's right to exist. Because in doing so, and allowing the human being to see that experience of the individual conversation's right to exist, a trip will happen, something will flip, a switch will go off in the human being, allowing the human being to understand, if this is what's going on within this body of mine, I wonder what my value is. Let me think about my value. So now the human being gets a lesson on what value is from seeing the devotional conversation, understanding the value of itself. And sure, at the end of it all, we may give thanks to the individual living mind that guided such an experience, that brought us to this, and for sure. But in a sense, that living mind steps out of the way, as it says in the book of Proverbs, guide thine own heart, steps out of the way so that the individual conversation can understand the wisdom it needs for its individual experience to fathom its existence. That living mind means nothing to the individual personal and devotional conversation that does not recognize and value its own existence. So while surface is saying, find the existence of the deity, core Bible philosophy is saying, find the existence of you. While surface, theological analysis, and quote unquote expert thought whether by voice or by pen, is leading their audience to uncover a figure that they will never find. Bible philosophy wants the individual, both personal and devotional, to uncover the character that has been lost to it. So these are two different experiences. These are two different spectrums of thought. When you really look at what the Bible's philosophy is offering, Bible's philosophy is offering an experience that is not attractive. Remember when it says there is no beauty in him, that we should um, value him? That wasn't talking about physical appearance. Beauty there, when you get down to the philosophical context of it, a beauty, beauty is what is received to another mind from what another is showing to it. And if you read the context from the chapter prior, from the chapter after, from the chapter therein, physical beauty is not the subject. The beauty that should be admired, the beauty that should be admired is the beauty that is fixed and associated to that concept of good and evil. It is because there is no beauty within that mind that he's neither accepted, brought in, thought high of, anything of the sort. But let that beauty exist as we today see that beauty exist in the supposed figure. Let him get a routine of bread and wine. Let him get a routine from former pagan religions called Lent and so on, Easter and so on. And all of a sudden, the one with no beauty is loved. Bible is letting their audience know, especially in the book of Genesis, that the surface experience is for the surface character. The surface experience is for the surface character. You will not be able to escape imaginary images joined to a veil. You will not be able to escape the idea of the visions of Isaiah and you needing to have that. You will not be able to escape the Moses and all of that. You will not be able to escape anything of such a sort because it is depending on the frequency and the energy that you are bringing to the experience that this living environment knows. We can't fool the environment. We can't fool the environment. Just as how everything around us is physical, yet if you had to pinch it down to its finest and minutest detail, there is absolutely zero physicality in it. It is the same thing. It is the absolute same thing with Bible. Bible is written flesh-based. But if you have to just get down to its core, you will see that there is nothing flesh-based. There is nothing causing the human being to feel stimulated by anything that is therein. That's another persuasion. When I'm saying persuasion, I'm saying cause, course, engagement, learning, track, field. That's a whole nother thing. Bible is a thing of its own. And Bible's mind, it goes beyond religion. And contrary as it may seem, Bible's mind goes beyond God. Bible's mind understands and fathoms that there is no traditional religion, there is no traditional God, there is no traditional Jesus. These are all imaginary figures joined to a veil, encased within the surface of the scriptures to confine and to also repel its not so vibrant characters and the philosophy that is within it. When we can get past, when I say again, get past Allow those waters of people's nations' tongues and families of denominated understandings that have so from beginning of time until now, 2024, all we have is information and material, and all we have is the idea of our opinion to mix with material and opinion. We can just separate those waters and get down to that dry ground and then just look up. What we will find on the other side is an experience where our personal and our devotional being is manifesting to who we are. This is what makes our living life enjoyable. Bible philosophy, at its core, does not invest in any sort of afterlife talk. Bible philosophy, at its core, invests in the present. That's why it's written in present tense. What you will see engaged, and this is also what the illustration of Genesis is getting at, of the two trees. An experience for personal and devotional well-being and understanding the character of that. If that's not what we're about, if that's not what we are here for, and when I say here, I mean with Bible in hand and with pen in the next, to study, if that's not what we are engaging this for, all we're going to get are imaginary figures joined to a Baal. Doesn't matter who they are. Let it be Marduk, let it be Amun, let it be Ra, let it be El, let it be Chemosh, let it be Molech, let it be Zeus, let it be Dionysus, let it be Tammuz, let it be Osiris, let it be Horus, let it be whoever it will be. We're going to get that. And that's just going to be what it is. And if we don't get that, we're going to get the frustration of not getting that. We're going to hate that. And again, that's also our gift because we are not giving time and the credit that our conversation needs and deserves to its own self to understand the experience that it has been kept from and will continue to be kept from how we are mistreating our own self. And that's at the heart of the scriptures care and well-being for the devotional conversations, thoughts, and feelings. Um, Anything more, anything less, that's not Bible. And what we're reading on the surface, that's not Bible. When we penetrate into the core, when we penetrate into the center, we're not even we don't even fathom what that is because we don't know, but we have to experience that. And when we do, that's how the experience becomes timeless. And that's a key word, timeless, because you go to the Proverbs and in chapter 3, where it says, keep my words for length of days and let them enter into your heart, and long life shall they give you. From Genesis to Malachi, the idea of length of days and long life is not assigned to the human being, it is assigned to the conscience of the conversation. It is only assigned to the conscience of the conversation because when placed within there, it trickles down into our human being for our existence. There's a whole route to what the Bible is getting at. But the surface of it is going to trip us up if we are not plunging into it with the right energy, with the right frequency. That's just what we will be given. So I think I've gone on enough. But the comments from, that I'm getting, and it's just really fascinating to see the responses and to hear and to interact with individuals that are going through their own experience and at times afraid of what the other side is. Because on the other side, they believe is this, on the other side, they believe is that, and the fear of confronting whatever needs to be confronting due to what is believed to be on the other side. But when you break all this down and strip certain things away and just let the Bible speak, all that the core philosophy of the scriptures really want the individual to realize is the liberty of their conversation's conscience. Let that go. Let it exist as its own individual. And we will return to who we're supposed to return to be due to its growth and its development. So, You know, I love the comments and I love everything. Um, Please keep them coming. And with that, I will, as always, for the rest of this week, I don't know what you're going through or where you are, but of course, all things for the sake of creation. Everything that we're going through is for the purpose of creating what is personally and devotionally within us for better. But also, alongside that, is the idea of what we are going through to understand more of what we are not understanding and to understand more of what we already do understand or are supposedly understanding. It's what all that we do, taking and capturing that, letting that be what it's supposed to be for the sake of our conversation moving beyond the plateau that we have so kindly and uh, negligently accepted for it.